Hi, I'm David Holland. Welcome to PlanStrongerTV. Long-term care. Yes, we must talk about long-term care. It's an important subject, and I'm not saying you have to do anything about it, but you have to consider your options and know what's involved. I'm excited to bring on the program Brad Breeding, a certified financial planner and specialist in the area. Stick around. I know the subject of long-term care is not fun, okay? I know you would rather I talk about how to save money on your next vacation or cruise. Guess what? Me too. But it's something that's important for us to consider as part of an overall financial plan. And you know what? You've got to pay for it. If you need long-term care, it's got to be paid for. So you only got a couple of choices. One, it's going to come out of your assets. It's going to come out of your income. It's going to come from your family. It's going to come from insurance, or it's going to come from the government, Medicaid, taxpayers. There's only so many choices. Now, the statistics are not good. They're not fun either. 2/3 of Americans 65 or older will need some form of long-term care during their lifetime. Now, it may not be that long. You may beat the odds. You may not need it at all, or you might need it a little bit, or you might need it for a long time. So it's not something we can just dismiss or say, deal with that tomorrow. We do that. That's who we are as people, right? We do that. We don't want to deal with stuff like that that's maybe not as fun or as interesting as maybe how much I'm going to make on my investments or how much income am I going to get every month that I can enjoy during retirement and play and do the things I want to do. But that doesn't change the fact that it's important. So all I ask of any client I work with, and what I would submit to you, isn't that you have to do something about long-term care, but that you think about your options and you have a plan for it. And your plan might be, I'm going to try to beat the odds and I'm going to have somebody in my family take care of me. Okay, but is that the best option? Are there other options that would work better? You don't have to do it, you just have to consider it. So we're going to consider it on today's program. Brad Breeding is with me to talk about it. Let's get to it. Long-term care is a big topic. I'm very glad to tell you that we brought in a heavy hitter, an expert in the industry. Brad Breeding is a certified financial planner since 2006. He's also worked as an advisor, and he is co-founder and president of My Life Site. It's a website dedicated to helping individuals and families evaluate and select the right type of retirement community for them. So Brad comes to us from North Carolina. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you on the program. So I think we need to just jump right in because there's so much to get to. Yeah. So let's dive right in here. Long-term care. I know this is your specialty. It's what you spend. You get up at like 5 and don't stop till midnight thinking about long-term care. But you do a lot of work in this area. So the big thing that people I think get tripped up on is it's such an unknown, or unless you've dealt with it personally, it's just kind of removed. Mm-hmm. Even though we have so many people who are dealing with it, it's still something, unless you've dealt with it personally, it's not something people are as familiar with. So I think the first thing for the viewers is to help them understand the types of care that are available and where to access them.
Sure. Well, when we talk about the different types of care, I think it's helpful to think in terms of a continuum of care.
Okay.
So whether you're in your own home or in some type of a facility or community, thinking about that continuum of care, which generally starts with independent living, or those that can live either mostly or completely on their own with no help.
At their home, or maybe in a facility or apartment, or
either or,
something
any or
in
all
there?
of the above.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we just think purely in terms of the continuum of care, kind of take the setting out of it.
Okay.
Just you can either live independently, and then maybe moving along, somebody may need a little bit of help just on a day, maybe a couple hours a day, which we would generally call supportive services.
Okay.
You move a little further along the continuum into assisted living, where a little more care is needed on a daily basis, and perhaps that's the type of care that may not even be able to be provided adequately in your own home.
Okay.
Depending on the level of need, you may have to go to a community. And then, of course, as you go from there, memory care, and then skilled medical care, kind of what people would think of as nursing care, sometimes 24 hours. So that's kind of the continuum of care. And so when we talk about where people access it, it really depends on where you are on that continuum, how much care you need, and who's going to provide it, and whether it can be provided in a safe and adequate manner in your home or not.
Okay. Well, there's so much to this, and I'm like, where do we start? And that's a great overview. And let's back up even further. When I say the word care, what, somebody might be listening and watching us talk about it, Brad, and they think, well, care, does that mean they come over and do my dishes? Or are they helping me get to the bathroom and back and take a shower?
That's exactly right. Yeah, so you hear the statistics about long-term care and assisted living, and the most popular one you probably hear comes from the CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and it says that 70% of all people are going to need assisted living. But it's a pretty broad definition. It could include somebody coming in and just doing some homemaking types of services for you. So that's where you kind of drill down a little bit from there.
The fluff and tuck you in.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. That's it. So so it's a really broad definition. So that's where you really have to kind of define what type of care you need before you can understand and start to plan, for what's best. Okay, so let's use a practical example, and this is something that our viewers may have dealt with or have friends and family that have dealt with it. So dad's getting a little older, dad or spouse is getting older, and they are having trouble with some of these activities. They're called the activities of daily living. And we're not talking about just, needing help with some basic stuff. We're talking about, being able to get in and out of the bathtub, being able to eat properly, being able to get around, all of these, dressing. So when you start getting into that care can start in the home, and then as you go along where you need more higher levels of care and assistance. So for a lot of people, in your experience, Brad, a lot of people stay in the home for as long as possible if they have somebody who can help or bring somebody in. That's right.
But then at some point, they've got to make the next step.
That's right. So the vast majority of people want to stay in their own homes. Home is where the heart is.
Right.
It's where memories and maybe raised children and grandchildren there. And a lot of very emotional-based reasons for wanting to stay in the home. But when you look at the practical side of it, or maybe the impractical side, there's a lot of things that you really need to think through. And so when it comes to receiving care in the home, most of the time, such care is provided by a family member. Unpaid family caregivers. And it was interesting, a study came out a couple of years ago from MetLife that pointed the fact that the average family caregiver really gives up about over $300,000 in just future wages, benefits, Social Security that maybe they've given up because in terms of their calculation from being away from work. And so it really adds up. So not only that, but physically and emotionally, it's very taxing on that family caregiver. So that's the first thing, is who's going to provide my care if and when I need it. And it's so easy to put that off, to wait, not have those discussions with your family members, not talk about what might be needed in the future. And so many families, unfortunately, just wait until some health event occurs, and then the family goes into crisis mode, trying to figure out, what do we do? What are the options? Where do we need to go? Who do we need to talk to? And you can really help address a lot of that earlier on if you just have these conversations and at least know what the options are.
Wait a minute, are you suggesting we plan ahead?
Plan ahead, imagine that.
Well, the number you gave, Brad, that's really, I think, a key thing for the audience to have in mind, because $300,000 for somebody to miss out on because they're caring for that person, be it a spouse or a family member. And we compare that to the cost of actually either prepaying for a facility like a continuing care retirement community, or buying a long-term care policy, or allocating dollars into a special account to provide for long-term care. I mean, that really frames the question of how vital it is, or how important it is, to look at other ways of getting the care besides just relying on family. And a lot of times, family's not even equipped.
Well, that's exactly right. They're not trained as caregivers. They just do what they can because out of love,
Right.
really. And who wouldn't, right? We want to take care of those we love, but it's a tough job, and like you said, we're not always equipped for that.
Right.
I want to address that number for a minute. Of course, that's an average,
Sure,
300
sure.
some thousand, some more or less. But what happens is a lot of times caregivers have to take time away from their careers. Sometimes it's early retirement, which just the loss of benefit or the loss of wages is one
Yeah.
thing, but then you have the ripple effect that if I'm earning less money, that's less I can contribute to retirement. And it also, as I said a minute ago, impacts my Social Security calculation. So when you take the present value
Wow.
of that future loss of income and benefits, that's kind of where they come up with that number. And that's not even including the out-of-pocket costs that most families, $5,000 to $10,000 a year, they pay out of pocket just to support buying different things they need and so forth. So again, having those discussions with your loved ones, from both angles, children, the adult children need to have that, mom, dad, what would we want to do if this happened?
Right.
What would you want? And nobody likes to talk about these things, but it's a casual conversation.
Well, and you've really we've kind of jumped into this idea of how we're going to pay for it when you look at those costs. So is that the way we go and we have it be paid for, in effect, by reducing what somebody else might earn or lost wages and things you talked about, Brad? But how other people will look at paying for it? Do they just pay out of pocket? Do they just write checks out of their bank account because they've got this account sitting there? Have they purchased some form of insurance? Or have they made arrangements, a reservation, if you will, by putting a deposit down to be in a continuing care retirement community? So you've got different choices, of course, that will depend on the person and their situation and what's realistic.
Sure. There's a range of options, as you said. For those who stay in their own home, generally you're talking either long-term care insurance, if they have it.
Sure.
If they haven't dropped it, because we know what's kind of going on in that industry over the last few years,
Yeah.
premiums, right, and so for the increases there. But long-term care insurance, private pay, paying out of pocket.
Okay.
If they hire care, obviously there's a cost to that as well. You have obviously Medicaid. If you are, for all intents and purposes, financially destitute and you don't have the means to pay for that care, then Medicaid. But with the annual shortfalls that we see with Medicaid,
Sure.
that's not something that people necessarily want to rely on going forward.
Don't plan on being broke.
well
Or trying to look broke, and I'm sure you have some thoughts about that as well as I do. This idea of trying to qualify for Medicaid when you have resources, or you could have done things to protect your money and make plans. I think it's much better to, and the requirements are so low. You got to be really, impoverished.
Sure, that's right. You do, and one of the things that's starting to happen more is people that have equity in their homes, and I'm sure
Right.
you know this.
Sure.
Reverse mortgages
Right.
are becoming a little more, I guess, accepted.
Absolutely.
The fees, I think, have come down over
Definitely.
the last few years, and regulations have gotten a little tighter, and I think
Right.
that's becoming a little more of a viable solution for people that have equity in their home. Not everybody's going to have that or be able to do that, but that's one more option that I'm seeing more and more people start to look at is using that equity in their home to pay for some of these costs. So a lot of times
good.
it's a combination of things. It may be a combination of using some money, some of my savings perhaps, combined with maybe some reverse mortgage to some degree, and maybe a little bit of long-term care insurance. I think those are the kind of things people need to, I don't think there's one single solution. So when we talk about planning ahead, it's what are some of the different vehicles that might make sense
Right.
for me down the road, and as a combination, maybe the way to go.
Well, and again, the financial planning process that is so important is looking at those different resources, what makes sense. And you just mentioned the reverse mortgage. I think that for the person, for example, who can't get the health insurance, the long-term care insurance, and they go, well, what do I do? How do I do this? Well, and I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a big savings account. Well, then they might look at their home if they have equity, and they might use that as a way to tap it, at least get a line of credit, a reverse mortgage line of credit,
Right.
what I call a RevLock.
Yeah.
And instead of a HELOC, it's a RevLock, and they have that on standby that they can use and pull against to pay for long-term care if they need it. And if they never need it, no harm, no foul.
That's right. Exactly. And they've got that option open.
And how about the continuing care retirement community? I think that's the one, and of course, you and I will spend more time talking about that on another program, but the continuing care retirement community, there is a way to buy into, basically be part of almost like a membership, if you will, to be able to be in this continuum of care, and there are some costs for that as well, either a deposit and then a monthly fee or a combination.
That's right. Continuing care retirement community is often referred to as a CCRC, or a life plan community, is what a lot of them are using now. So it's really can be a really good alternative for, or it can be a good choice for a long-term care plan, let's say.
Okay.
You know, generally speaking, a CCRC, the way it works is you're going to pay an entry fee in most cases, not always, usually an entry fee and a monthly fee, but what it does is, for all intents and purposes, it gives you access, lifetime access to, you know, housing and a range of care services. So that continuum of care I talked about earlier, that's where continuing care retirement community. So as you progress through the different levels, you know, if that's something that happens, if you start to need supportive services and assisted living and skilled care, it's going to be available for you in one spot. So there's a lot of benefits to that and a lot of peace of mind that comes. A lot of people see it as a gift to their children.
Sure.
That I've planned ahead, I'm in a place that can take care of me if I ever need it. And that's good. But, you know, there is a cost to that as well, and there's a lot of things you need to think about to determine whether that's right for you, and of course, just researching the community itself.
Yeah, that's another key factor. I think it reminds me of an analogy that a lot of people can relate to, which is the cruise ship. You can be on the ship and you can get all the stuff you want. It's right there, but you do have to pay for it. As nothing comes free, and there are different options. I think one of the other things that's really important is that there's different levels of care. So as people are progressing through the levels of care, they need to know that there's going to be, the costs are going to go up, right? I mean, the more attention you get, the more it costs.
Well, in some cases, not always. And that's where you get into kind of the details of the CCRC and the contract. So different communities have different types of contracts.
Okay.
Some of them as your needs advance, you'll pay more. Others, you might pay a little more while you don't need services, but then when you do, you're
prepaid.
You've kind of prepaid, exactly. So that's where you need to understand the contract and how that community works.
Okay, so when you look at this whole area of long-term care, is it fair to say that, number one, demand's not going to go down?
I think that's fair to say, yes.
I mean, we've got, 10,000 baby boomers that have retired or are retiring, and there are 10,000 turning 70 every day.
Yeah, right.
And so that's not going to lessen cost.
It's not going to lessen cost, not on us as individuals and not on the government either.
Okay.
So a lot to plan for.
And number two is that the things that keep us alive that would probably mean that we might need long-term care are only getting better. So it's like a double effect.
Well, you have this, people are living longer, but they have more chronic needs. Whereas decades ago,
it was acute.
It was acute, and families kind of moved in together on the family farm, and you took care of, your senior loved ones, but you didn't have they weren't living to 90 and 100 with 5 or 10 years of just chronic sort of needs. So that's kind of what we're facing today. So.
Yeah. Makes you wonder if we're better off today or not. It's the advances and then all these things, and we all, I sometimes will, with my clients, Brad, I'll have them say to me, well, I don't want to live to 100. And I say, well, you will when you're 99.
That's right. Good point.
I mean, we all want that lifestyle. Well, I think this is something that if people haven't thought about it, they haven't talked to their loved ones about it, they haven't made it part of their financial plan, they need to. So I'm glad you're here to help us sort it all out, and it's great insight. So thank you, Brad.
Well, thank you for having me.
Very good. Very good. Okay, time for viewer questions. A couple questions I got recently being interviewed by journalists in a financial magazine, and I thought they'd be real relevant for our program, so here they are. First question was about estate taxes and how much you can shield from taxes either at your death or during your lifetime. So now, I have to preface my answer by saying that at any moment, Congress and the President can completely make my comments obsolete, so I'll take that risk. Under current tax law, you can give during your lifetime or leave at your death roughly $5.5 million to anybody you want. You don't pay tax, and they don't pay tax. I'm talking about estate tax, death tax, inheritance tax. That's all the same. I'm not talking about income taxes right now. Our tax system is structured to be done in a way where there's different parts of it. So you have income taxes, Social Security taxes, and Medicare tax, estate taxes, and there can be other tax that you can consider. So these major tax categories all work independent of each other to some degree. So with estate taxes, if I say you can leave $5.5 million to somebody and they don't pay tax and you don't pay tax, that doesn't mean there might not be some income taxes, okay? So with $5.5 million as the amount you can leave, the need to plan and do a lot of strategies to save on estate tax or inheritance tax, obviously for most people, it's not an issue. And again, under current tax law, couples, married couples, can leave a combined $11 million. So what if we have eliminated, 99.9% of the population? So it's not as much of a big deal as it was maybe 30 years ago when the exemption amount or the amount that you could leave without tax was $600,000. So this has changed a lot over the years. Now again, at any moment, it could change and there could be no more any estate tax. So that's one part of it. The other part I wanted to answer from a question I got was how much you can give to somebody during your lifetime. Isn't there like this rule you can't give more than $14,000 or so away? And again, that number changes each year. That is a different part of the calculation. So you can give the whole $5.5 million. So let me give you an example. Let's say you've got $6 million and you say, I want to give as much as I can without any tax, estate or gift tax. Those two work together. You can give $5.5 million, there's no tax. What if you want to give more than that? Well, then you have to pay estate taxes or gift taxes on that gift or what you leave somebody at your death. If you want to give more than that, you can give an amount per year without any tax. And that's where that $14,000 comes in. That's part of this annual exclusion. And so you can give each person $14,000 a year with no tax consequence, without affecting how much you give at your death, that $5.5 million, or that you might give during your lifetime. But you can give this $14,000 every year. And sometimes people think that that's all you can give. And that's really kind of my key point in answering this question. You can give as much as you want. Now, some people will say, well, the 14, isn't that a limit? It's not really a limit. It's just the amount you can give each year without having to eat into the $5.5 million and have that, count against you later. So these are both parts of the same tax system, and it gets a little complicated, but that's what I'm here for. So if you'd like me to answer your question, just shoot me an email. Happy to do it on the program. One more thing before you go. Serious subject. Who's controlling the purse strings? If you're in a relationship, spousal or other, and there are issues about money, maybe one person is controlling the other. If you are being controlled financially, this is serious. I've seen it happen, and I encourage you to get help. Save money, squirrel it away, prepare yourself to be able to get some guidance and counsel. If you need to see an attorney to maybe look at divorce, maybe look at counseling. But it doesn't have to be the way it is. Nobody should be in a position where they are controlled by somebody else because of money. And there are a lot of different scenarios. There's a lot of different ways that people will control another person by either threatening to leave, by keeping track of every dollar, micromanaging, keeping that person working all the time and then basically controlling all the money, having complete control over the finances where a person doesn't have the ability to do anything with the money. So if that's the situation, get help. Don't settle. It's never too late to try to get things set up and structured to be right and to be fair. And hopefully there's a conversation you can have to try to work through things. But if you can't, or you're fearful of your own safety, see an attorney. Look at your options, and I'd like to say that'll help you plan stronger. In a way it will, but more important, it'll let you live your life and not be controlled. And that's my parting message for you.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.